Hey friends! Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Neil Brian Galve and this is NurseBrain. And I want to start this video with a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if I told you that you're walking around right now with a superpower that took humanity thousands of years to develop, and most people have absolutely no idea how it works? I'm talking about your immune system after vaccination. And here's the thing that absolutely blew my mind when I started researching this topic. Vaccines don't just prevent disease. They literally train your body to become a disease-fighting machine in ways that are so sophisticated. They make the most advanced AI system look primitive. So, in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how vaccines work at a level that most people never get to see. We're going to cover the fascinating science of how your immune system learns and remembers, why vaccines are actually one of the greatest achievements in human history, the different types of vaccines, and how they work differently, and most importantly, why understanding this science matters for every single decision you make about your health. Now, I want to be completely transparent here. I am not a doctor or an immunologist, but I've spent weeks diving deep into the research on this topic because I realized that most explanations of how vaccines work are either oversimplified to the point of being wrong or so technical that nobody can understand them. At the end of this video, you're going to understand vaccines better than probably 95% of people, including some healthcare professionals. Because here's the thing, when you understand how vaccines actually work, a lot of the debates and controversies around them start to make a lot more sense. But first, let me give you some context on why this matters. Vaccines have prevented an estimated 60 million deaths from measles alone between 2000 to 2023. We're talking about one of the most successful medical interventions in human history, and yet most people couldn't explain how they work if their life depended on it. Let me start by completely changing how you think about your immune system. Because the way most people understand it is like thinking a smartphone is just a really fancy calculator. Most people think that immune system is just white blood cells that eat bad stuff. But that's like saying the internet is just computers talking to each other. Technically true, but it misses the incredible sophistication of what's actually happening. Here's what's really going on. Your immune system is essentially a biological intelligence network that can learn, remember, and adapt. It's like having a personal army with its own intelligence, agency, special forces, and long-term memory storage system. When a pathogen that's any disease-causing organism like a virus or bacteria enters your body, your immune system doesn't just attack it randomly. It goes through a sophisticated process that's honestly more complex than most military operations. First, you have these cells called antigen-presenting cells that are basically like scouts. They patrol your body, and when they find something that doesn't belong, they capture it and bring it back to headquarters, your lymph nodes. Then, you have these incredible cells called T helper cells that are like intelligence analysts. They examine the captured pathogen and figure out exactly what it is and how to fight it. They can send out signals to activate the right type of response. But here's where it gets really cool. You also have B cells that are like weapons manufacturers. When they get the signal from the T helper cells, they start producing antibodies that are specifically designed to neutralize that exact pathogen. These antibodies are so specific that they're like having a key that only fits one lock. And this is the part that absolutely blew my mind. After the infection is cleared, some of these B cells and T cells become memory cells. They literally remember that pathogen for decades, sometimes for your entire life. So, If you ever encounter that same pathogen again, your immune system can mount a response so fast and so effective that you don't even get sick. That is why you typically only get chickenpox once. Your immune system remembers it and stops it before it can make you sick again. Now, here's where vaccines come in. And this is where the science gets absolutely fascinating. Vaccines are basically a way to give your immune system a practice run against a disease without actually getting the disease. It's like training for a marathon by running shorter distances instead of just showing up on a race day and hoping for the best. But here's what's really clever about how vaccines work. They contain what's called an antigen, which is basically the part of the pathogen that your immune system uses to recognize it. Think of it like showing your immune system a wanted poster of a criminal before they commit a crime. Now, there are different ways to create these antigens, and this is where different types of vaccines come in. Some vaccines use weakened versions of the actual virus or bacteria. These are called live attenuated vaccines, and they're incredibly effective because they give your immune system a very realistic practice session. Other vaccines use killed versions of the pathogens. These are safer for people with compromised immune systems, but they usually require multiple doses because the immune response isn't quite as strong. Then, you have a newer vaccines that just use pieces of the pathogen, maybe just a protein from the surface of the virus. These are called subunit vaccines, and they are very safe because there's no way they can cause the disease. And then you have a really high-tech vaccines like mRNA vaccines, which are like giving your cells the blueprint to make the antigen themselves. It's like instead of showing your immune system a wanted poster, you're teaching your cells how to print their own wanted posters. But here's the key thing that all vaccines have in common. They all trigger that same sophisticated immune response I described earlier. Your antigen-presenting cells capture the vaccine antigens. Your T helper cells analyze them. Your B cells start producing antibodies, and most importantly, you develop memory cells that will remember this pathogen for years or decades. The beautiful thing is that this all happens without you getting sick, because the vaccine doesn't contain enough of the pathogen to cause disease, or it contains a version that can't cause disease. Now, here's something that confuses a lot of people, and it's a question I get asked all the time. If vaccines create memory cells that last for decades, why do some vaccines need boosters? This is actually a really sophisticated question that gets to the heart of how different pathogens interact with your immune system. Let me give you an example that completely changed how I think about this. The measles vaccine, specifically the MMR vaccine, typically provides lifelong protection with just 2 doses. You get vaccinated as a child and you're basically protected for life. That's because the measles virus doesn't change very much over time. So the memory cells your immune system creates are still effective decades after. But then, you have something like the flu vaccine, which you need to get every year. That's because influenza viruses are constantly mutating and changing their surface proteins. It's like the criminal keeps changing their appearance, so you need updated wanted posters every year. COVID-19 vaccines are somewhere in between. The original vaccines provided excellent protection against the original strain of the virus. But as the new variants emerged with different characteristics, boosters became necessary to maintain optimal protection. But here's what's really interesting. Even when you need boosters, your immune system doesn't start from scratch. Those memory cells from your previous vaccinations are still there, and they help your immune system respond faster and more effectively to the booster. It's called immunologic memory. and it's one of the most elegant biological systems I've ever learned about. There's also the question of how long protection lasts, and this varies depending on the vaccine and the individual. Some people maintain high levels of antibodies for decades, while others might see their antibody levels decline over time. But here's the key thing: even if your antibody levels drop, those memory cells are still there, ready to spring into action if needed. This is why the science around the vaccine schedules is so complex. Researchers have the balance providing optimal protection with practical considerations like how many shots people are willing to get and how long protection needs to last. Now, let's dive deeper into the different types of vaccines, because understanding this will help you make sense of a lot of the discussion around vaccine safety and effectiveness. I mentioned earlier that there are different ways to create vaccine antigens, but let me break this down in more detail, because each approach has different advantages and trade-offs. Live attenuated vaccines use weakened versions of the actual pathogen. The measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine is a great example of this. These vaccines are incredibly effective because they give your immune system a very realistic training session. The weakened pathogen can still replicate in your body, but it can cause disease in healthy people. This creates a strong, long-lasting immune response that often provides lifelong protection. But here's a trade-off. Because these vaccines contain living organisms, they can potentially cause problems in people with severely compromised immune systems. That's why immunocompromised people usually can't receive live vaccines. Inactivated vaccines use killed versions of pathogens. The polio vaccine that most people get today is an example of this. These vaccines are very safe because there's no possibility of the pathogen causing disease, but they usually require multiple doses to build up adequate immunity. Then you have subunit vaccines, which only use specific species of pathogens, usually proteins from the surface that the immune system can recognize. The hepatitis B vaccine is an example of this. These are very safe and can be given to almost anyone, but they often require adjuvants. These are substances that help boost the immune response. And then you have the newer technologies like mRNA vaccines, which we saw with COVID-19. These vaccines contain genetic instructions that tell your cells how to make a specific protein from the pathogen. Your immune system then recognizes this protein as foreign and develops immunity against it. It's like teaching your cells to be vaccine factories. What's really cool about mRNA vaccines is that they can be developed very quickly once you know the genetic sequence of a pathogen. That's why COVID-19 vaccines were developed in record time. Not because safety was compromised, but because the technology allowed for rapid development. Each of these approaches has been refined over decades of research, and the choice of which type to use depends on the factors like specific pathogens, the target population, and practical considerations like storage requirements and cost. Now, let's talk about one of the most important concepts in vaccination, and it's something that most people don't fully understand. Herd immunity is the idea that when enough people in a community are immune to a disease, it protects everyone in that community, including people who can't be vaccinated. It's like having a fire break that prevents a wildfire from spreading. But here's what's really important to understand. Herd immunity isn't just a nice side effect of vaccination. For some people, it's literally a matter of life and death. There are people who can be vaccinated for medical reasons. Babies under 12 months old can get most vaccines because their immune systems aren't mature enough. People undergoing cancer treatment often can't be vaccinated because their immune systems are suppressed. People with certain genetic immune deficiencies can't safely receive live vaccines. These people rely on everyone around them being vaccinated to protect them. It's called community immunity, and it only works if vaccination rates stay high enough. The exact percentage needed for herd immunity varies depending on how contagious the disease is. For measles, which is incredibly contagious, you need about 95% of the population to be immune. For polio, it's around 80 to 85%. For COVID-19, estimates range from 70 to 90% depending on the variant. But here's what's really interesting. Herd immunity isn't an on and off switch. As vaccination rates drop below the threshold, you start seeing small outbreaks. As they drop further, you see larger outbreaks. And if they drop significantly, you can see the return of diseases that were previously eliminated. We've seen this happens in real time with measles. In communities where vaccination rates have dropped due to vaccine hesitancy. We've seen measles outbreaks that have affected hundreds of people and resulted in deaths. But herd immunity also explains some of the most remarkable success stories in public health. Smallpox was completely eradicated through vaccination. It's the only human disease we've ever completely eliminated from the planet. Polio has been eliminated from most of the world and is on track for complete eradication. The key insight here is that vaccination isn't just an individual choice, it's a community responsibility. Your vaccination status affects not just you, but everyone around you, especially the most vulnerable members of your community. Let me end with some perspective on just how revolutionary vaccines have been for human civilization, because I think this context gets lost in a lot of modern discussions. Before vaccines, infectious diseases were the leading cause of death for children. Parents routinely lost multiple children to diseases like diphtheria, whooping cough, and measles. The average life expectancy was much lower, largely because so many people died young from infectious disease. Vaccines changed all of that. We're talking about one of the most dramatic improvements in human health in history. In 20th century alone, vaccines prevented an estimated 1 billion deaths. That's not a typo. 1 billion people who are alive today because of vaccines. But it's not just about preventing deaths. Vaccines have prevented countless cases of disability, blindness, deafness, and other serious complications from infectious diseases. They've allowed children to grow up healthy and reach their full potential. The common impact is also staggering. Every dollar spent on childhood vaccination programs returns an estimated $44 in economic benefits. That's because preventing disease is always cheaper than treating it, and healthy populations are more productive. But perhaps most importantly, vaccines have given us something that previous generations could never have imagined: the ability to protect our children from diseases that terrorized previous generations. My grandparents' generation lived in fear of polio. They saw children in iron lungs, paralyzed for life by a virus. Today, most people have never seen a case of polio because vaccines eliminated it from most of the world. And we're not done. Researchers are working on vaccines for diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV. There are cancer vaccines in development that could prevent certain types of cancer. There are even vaccines being developed for addiction and Alzheimer's disease. The technology that started with Edward Jenner using cowpox to prevent smallpox in 1796 has evolved into one of the most sophisticated and effective medical technologies we have. And the best part is that we're still just getting started. So, here's what I want you to take away from this video. First, vaccines work by treating your immune system to recognize and fight specific pathogens without making you sick. It's one of the most elegant biological hacks ever discovered. Second, different types of vaccines work in different ways. but they all trigger the same sophisticated immune response that creates long-lasting protection. Third, vaccines don't just protect you, they protect your entire community, especially the most vulnerable members who can't be vaccinated themselves. And finally, vaccines represent one of the greatest achievements in human history. They've saved more lives than almost any other medical intervention, and they continue to protect billions of people every day. If you found this video helpful, I'd love it if you could give it a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about science and health topics like this, definitely subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Once again, this is NurseBrain, inspiring greatness one lesson at a time.